Good Sunday morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee along with my colleague John North. I'm John Becker, your moderators for what we're calling the tumultuous world of college athletics. You think? Only for the last couple of years. Joining us, someone hired to be a calming influence on that world, and it is David Blackburn, East Tennessee State University, GM of Revenue Sports. You are a pioneer, and we're going to get to that momentarily. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. It is definitely a crazy time.
So. It is indeed. We'll get to your pioneering role in just a minute. Our panel, Susan Richardson-Williams, she's a Republican, runs her own PR firm.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. Don Bosch is a Democrat and runs his own PR firm.
Good morning. Good to be with old
law
friends.
firm.
A law firm. Wait, when did he get into PR?
He does a little of both.
It does require many hats.
Yes, it does. Thank you both for being here. David, let's start with your role. GM at the athletic level in college seems sort of mind-boggling for many people who have followed college sports for their years. What do you say about it and its purpose now?
Yeah, I never thought I would see collegiate athletics where it's at now.
None of us did.
Nobody did. You know, that term is popular in professional sports, obviously. But the way things have evolved, I think it's important for the collegiate game. And so it's a fancy term, but really what it is, it's someone that works with the sport. At major schools, it's usually a GM per sport. What we're doing is across the board revenue generating sports. The three main revenue generators, I'll be the GM for them, mainly because of our budget and, you know, spread out, you know, the work with just fewer people. And the main role is to help the coach be strategic with how they run their operation, oversee roster management, oversee the new revenue sharing that's about to come into place July 1, work with the collectives that are in place and help them manage a lot of the issues that are going on so that they can do what they are really hired to do, and that's recruit, develop, and coach the student athlete. And so I hope I'm a support more than anything, and you know, an ear to bend and some advice to be given, and work with them to manage all the day-to-day issues that are developing.
We are seeing other schools move to this as well. And is it, you explained it there, but I just want to go a little bit deeper on that. Sure. Is it so a college coach doesn't have to say, okay, I've got $40 million to spend, and I've got to figure out how I'm going to dole out that pie. Is that your role now?
It is, yeah, and I obviously work with the coach because I want to know, you know, what's important for them. It's also a little bit of an insulation for the coach because you have to worry about locker room dynamics. You don't want player A being mad at player C for whatever he or she gets. And so it helps, you know, I'm kind of the, you know, if someone's upset, come talk to David. It's an insulation as well as assist them with managing all of those funds. There are contracts involved. There's dealings and conversations with agents. And it keeps the coach from getting tied up in all of that. It takes a lot of the emotion out of it. And I'm able to hopefully provide, you know, support to ease that whole process. And again, let them get back to focusing on dealing with the student athlete, coaching them, and certainly working on recruiting.
We're on the cusp of July 1, which is when sort of the revenue sharing starts in college. Obviously, a place like the University of Tennessee, SEC, you're looking at that $20.5 million that they're going to make available, which the fans are going to help pay for. Contrast that with the Southern Conference and ETSU. Y'all are not going to be throwing around $20 million, but you will have some money available.
Sure,
is that right?
we will not. Yeah, that's a lot of money.
That's
obviously.
a lot of money.
Yeah, and even some of the power schools will have trouble hitting that number. Obviously, your Tennessees, your Kentuckys, Georgias, whatever, they won't. You know, the Southern Conference, the league we're in, you know, schools are obviously operating in the NIL world and now the revenue share world. Most of them are anywhere from $300,000 to maybe $1 million, $1.5 million, all athletics included. So you're talking a whole lot smaller number, but the process and the dynamic is still identical to what the major schools are doing, just there's less zeros at the end of the contract.
So,
Dave,
I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask you, one of the things as settlement came down was that the NCAA has to pay back athletes who played from 2016 to present day. And you won't make that decision, but will you be involved in that? How is that going to happen? How do you decide who gets what? Is it a cap on what every athlete can get?
Yeah, so it's, I think the total is 2.77 or 2.8 billion over a 10-year period, dating back to, I think, 16 up to now. The breakdown globally is the power schools are going to be responsible for between 20 and 30 million per school over a 10-year period. The Group 5 schools will be between 5 and 15 million. And then our level will be between 1 and 3 million.
That's still a significant amount.
That's a significant amount. So, for example, ETSU, our league, we're approximately $250,000 per year that we pay into the settlement. And then as far as what student athletes get what, I don't know that. I've not had access to that, and we'll see that. But it's tiered, you know, from the powers down to our level.
Well, have you all, like at Tennessee, we who buy tickets have a talent fee.
Right.
It's been tacked onto our ticket price this year. Are you all doing the same thing in order to recoup some
We currently are not. We're just not sure that that's palatable currently for our fan base.
Ticket base.
Yeah. That's not to say that at some point we won't have to do that, because we're all worried about the revenue coming in. But that's a model several schools are going to, certainly at the main, the Power 4 level.
We're going to take a quick break. Don Bosch, lead us off in the second break. David Blackburn, GM at ETSU, is our guest this morning on Inside Tennessee. Back with more right after this. Back on Inside Tennessee with the new GM at ETSU, a new role in college athletics. David Blackburn, a pioneer in this role. Nice to have you with us. Don.
So, David, you mentioned kind of at the onset of the show that you're the person that's providing advice and guidance to the coach, to the administration, to the university. And we talked beforehand that this is coming at everybody through a fire hose. And we don't know, and you probably don't know, and I'm involved in a couple of aspects of it just as a lawyer. How are you learning really what the rule is today? Because every day we see a new development, whether it's a Title IX lawsuit or the adoption of house or a new movement or, you know, the portals, discussion about portal changes. How are you keeping up and getting the knowledge you need to be able to give good, cogent advice?
Tremendous question. It's a nerve-wracking issue, because you're right, it's truly minute by minute. We have conferences we go to, we have Zooms with the new CSC, the Collegiate Sports Commission, the NCAA are members of that, and they've done a good job of educating us. I just think the questions are, you know, what are the Title IX implications? Obviously, that's a huge question.
I've been saying that now for several months, and I believe that's going to really impact what this looks like in a year or 2 or 3 after that litigation.
Correct. The international students, you know, what is the income? Is the IRS declaring that passive or active, which affects visa status?
Right, and just for our viewers, international students, whether they're athletes or not, historically can't earn money, right?
Yeah.
But it's different under the NIL. They can under certain conditions.
They can under the collective. They have to perform the task for the money through the collective off American soil. And most of the ones we have do that. And I've talked to the group here, Spire. They're doing that, and it's okay to enter into an agreement with them to pay them through the collective. But again, that's a question moving forward: how are the international students treated? We have so many questions that we're just going to have to work through. Unfortunately, I'm afraid there'll be litigation, and it'll take time for some of this stuff to wash out.
So, it's sort of nuts and bolts. We heard a story here recently, of course, and you probably followed it. Zakai Ziegler was claiming that he could make $4 million a year. We know, of course, Imaliva, our quarterback that's left, was making $2 million a year and was wanting $4 million. What are the dynamics at a place like ETSU? What are your high salaries, so to speak? We'll call them that, with basketball, football, the big revenue sports.
Yeah, we're not paying anyone more than 6 figures, certainly, but still 6
That's
figures.
Annually, right?
Yeah, 6 figures is a lot. And then that number goes down to as small as maybe $3,000. But still, you're talking significant differential from what it was, 3 years ago.
When I was here, we were glad to get a pair of tennis shoes. So,
yeah, and that's not uncommon for our level. Certainly the Group 5 and obviously the Tennessees of the world are paying massive amounts of money, what I would call massive amounts of money, and it's It's a lot.
I'm
Well,
wondering what this will do.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I'm wondering what this will do within, say, the Southern Conference. You all have UT Chattanooga in that as well,
Right.
and Samford is there too. Excuse me. So we've heard overall the haves do better and the have-nots sort of are hurt even more. Even within the Southern Conference, for example, is some of that competition just going to sort of like, sorry, we're going to leave you in the dirt here?
I think so. I think the ones that are willing to invest in this will certainly be more competitive. I do think the coach that still has a premium on relationship, how they treat the student athlete, you know, the kind of person they are around the players, I still think that matters at our level, because the money, while it is still big, it's not life-changing, but it will. Those that are willing to invest in this, whether through the collective or through revenue sharing, I think will separate themselves. It's just the nature of the game.
Yeah.
David, so you all will say $1 million. UT has $20.5 million that they will spend. You have, let's just say you have $1 million. Is that all going to go to basketball, maybe your number one sport, football, basketball? Any of the minor sports get anything out of that?
They do. It's certainly weighted heavily at the top through the main revenue generators, which for us is men's basketball and football. Obviously, ladies basketball is right there. For us, we had a really good year baseball. But we're doing it across all sports. It's just very heavy on the revenue the higher revenue generating sports.
Y'all did have a good baseball year. You beat Tennessee.
We did, and had some good players. But again, our top pitcher obviously transferred to Tennessee last week,
Right.
and as he would. He's from Knoxville and a great person and a great player, but that's the dynamic you deal with too. Tennessee does as well. The Georgias, Alabamas do. A lot of times they get recruited and maybe
money.
Someone can pay more or what.
Real quick, what's the percentage of new student athletes you get every year? We talked about this before, and it's kind of astounding.
It's astounding. For example, our basketball team, probably 75–80% of them turned over.
Wow.
A year?
This
each
spring,
year?
each year. Football, probably more close to 40%, 50% at our level. Because remember, if you've got a really good player, they're getting recruited up.
Which is still much higher than traditionally.
Correct.
Yeah.
Traditionally, you might lose. You obviously had graduation, you had a few attritions and a few transfers. Now, you may be bringing in 35 new people in December in football, for example.
Whereas
we brought in
before,
7 or 8 new people in basketball in March and April.
Whereas before that might be a handful in football and a couple in basketball.
Right. It might be just who graduated and a few transfers. Okay. Basketball, it might be, again, who graduated and maybe one person quit, one transferred, and you're bringing in maybe 3–4 people. Now, and what that does is that stresses your department, because every 6 months you're onboarding all these new athletes, and so it stresses academics, your medical staff, your compliance staff, financial aid. It has to draw up all the financial.
No more summer break for David Blackburn.
No more summer break. Yeah.
We're going to take another quick break, and we're going to ask about fans, the impact on them when we come back right after this. John North and I welcome you back on this Sunday morning on Inside Tennessee. David Blackburn is our guest, the GM at ETSU. And I mentioned the fans before we went to break. This has been head spinning for anybody who loves college athletics. What do you say to fans who are seeing some of their favorite players bounce after 1 year? And I give one instance in UT softball, where we saw one of the star redshirt freshmen jump within 9 hours or so, I think I have that right, from the University of Tennessee to Texas Tech, and it looked like she was recruited. We saw Coach Weekly say, this is just wrong. And I think that's the sentiment from a lot of fans, like, this is not the college athletics I know.
It's a very fair point for the fan. It's frustrating for someone like me that's been in it a long time. Unfortunately, you have bad actors out there, and you have a lot of agents and a lot of proxies that are cutting deals for student athletes, and unfortunately many of them are not doing it within the few rules we have left, and it's rough. It's for the traditional fan, it's become very transactional, and I'm sure that's certainly hard, especially if you follow someone and all of a sudden they're no longer there. And I have a hard time with it as well, being a long-time, athletics department member that worked under a totally different model. But I will say, learned to embrace it because I don't think it's going to change, at least not anytime soon.
So, David, talking about a long time, you and I go back to our undergraduate days together.
Yes,
you
sir.
were a manager on the football team.
Yep.
Is where you got your start. I was a swimmer, so no one paid attention to us but our
Right.
girlfriends and parents.
That's right.
And so, but tell us the stops you've been at and how that's impacted where you come today professionally and learn to do what you do.
Yeah, the most important stop obviously was my first one. I was a manager here at Tennessee.
But you went on to much more here.
Yeah, we were teasing. There's not more than 3% been in Neyland Stadium more than me because of my role in football as a student and then all those years as an employee. And I worked here in the athletics department for 23 years or so. And so that's been the most important stop for me. So many people helped develop me, give me opportunity. I can't say enough about that. I was fortunate to leave here to go be athletics director at Chattanooga for 5 years. And then after that, I was at MTSU for 4.5 years, and then I retired and moved to Johnson City, and I started helping them out part-time at ETSU, and now I'm with them in more of a
Sucked back into the
more of a
web.
full-time role.
right.
So it's been all within the state of Tennessee, and it's been wonderful.
Well, David, one of the things that I find really disconcerting about all this is your boosters who are having to give. It's something we just talked about, but you know, you're having to give to NIL, you're having to give to athletics in general, you're having to buy your tickets. Can you still give to the business school or the College of Nursing? Are you seeing that? I mean, at Tennessee, we've got some wealthy donors, there's no
Sure.
question about it, but a smaller school like yours, isn't this going to hurt the overall
Impact the
program?
other programs
Yeah.
at ETSU.
I mean,
Great
it's got
point.
to.
It does. We're worried about that. We're worried about that. From that standpoint, we're also worried about sustainability. How often can we continue to go to these donors? But it does. So many of our donors, and much like probably Tennessee, they do like to be involved in other
Sure.
programs as well. And you almost force them to make a decision. My biggest concern is we're constantly going back to the same people that
Same group.
have been willing to come
Right.
forward with their generosity. And so over time, I don't know how it's going to look. Even for the big schools like Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, UCLA, whatever, I just don't know.
There are just limited resources
There
that
are,
you have,
and you know,
you're asking them to contribute to 5 or 6 or 10 different parts of the university.
Yeah, and two, you got to remember, if you run into a bad run or two, a bad couple of years where several of your
When you're not
sports are
winning,
struggling,
yeah.
we all know that that makes a difference. And does the money dry up when that happens? It still remains to be seen. I'm fearful of that at all levels.
Yeah, I think
We
it
talked
does.
off camera about how we are just embarking on this, so we really don't know how it's going to turn out, but we know it's going to be a bumpy road. However, I have heard some consideration that what's going to need to happen is for Congress to step in and actually pass some laws that address this. I don't know if anybody's thinking about that on your end yet or not.
We hear a lot about that. Obviously, that may be what has to happen, especially if you talk about collective bargaining. As it relates to truly following a
And
professional
that would be
model.
the athletes basically forming their own union to bargain with the NCAA
Just
and
like
their
pro.
universities.
Right.
Just like
Yeah,
pro.
and the
That's right.
Congress could allow that, and so I think that's probably ultimately within 3 to 5 years, maybe where it's headed. I don't pretend to know that, but certainly seems like that might be, at the end of the day, the best answer. The question there is, you know, do you want them becoming employees of the institution? What headaches come with that? Is your infrastructure able to manage that? Larger schools probably are well equipped for that because of personnel. Smaller schools have a harder time with that, but we'll see. I think that may be where it's headed.
Is the NCAA an organization that still makes sense in this era?
I think it does. And as it relates to championships, you know, that's still a big component of what they do. There's still eligibility issues that have to be managed. Certainly from an enforcement and from a rules perspective, things have changed. It's had to be
There are none.
highly deregulated, but they still have a strong footprint in what, you know, in how we operate. The CSC, the Collegiate Sports Commission, will become a major player too. The commissioners and ADs that are on that commission to make sure we're operating in this new era within the guidelines that they've set. So we really now have 2 organizations that we respond to.
In the minute left that we have here, David, what would you recommend people look for in the coming year? What are some watch signs to sort of mark and say, I see this happening?
Yeah, I think Title IX to me is still a big issue. No one's talked a lot about it. I know there's been a couple appeals filed, I think, last week. We'll see what happens. Is there a stay put in place before July 1? I don't know. To me, that's a red flag that someone needs to certainly keep an eye on, because it's important. I think sustainability over time, that's not going to be something in a year, but over time, I think sustainability is a major concern that people need to keep an eye on. Look at these programs and see what's happening. I'm concerned about it.
What about the portal? Will we see changes there, do you think?
Portal's probably for football coaches, it's the highest stress point in the new operating mechanism we have now, because they can affect leave 2 times a year. Basketball is a little better, but the portal window, I think you would like to see all coaches have one portal window, a tight window, and somehow regulate the tampering that's going on when students enter the portal.
We're going to leave it there for now, but David Blackburn, we'd love to have you back, and we wish you best of luck at ETSU and appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you so much. It's great seeing old friends, and really appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Back with our talk around What's the Gossip in honor of Dennis Francis. Back with that right after this. On this Sunday morning, John North, what's the gossip is what's the cash?
Yeah. How big is your wallet, or what's in your wallet? We've had a really lively discussion off camera about this. We've known it's been coming, and y'all have talked about it, but you are not, you don't give enough money to like build sections of the stadium or whatever, but you both give, you contribute to UT, and this has been a strain, and it looks like it'll continue to be a strain, and maybe not even sustainable.
Yeah, I don't think it is sustainable. This year they did tack 10% on, called a talent fee, to all of the tickets. Now we buy football, basketball, baseball, and so at some point down the line we may have to decide which sport we're going to support. I may have to give up 2 of the sports and just concentrate on one, because it is not sustainable to most of us. Now, we've got some large donors who can give and doesn't bother them, but the average fan, when you start getting 10% every year, that's a lot of money. We so far have done it, but we also have to contribute in order to get the tickets that we would like to have. So that's separate and above the cost of the tickets.
Don, we asked David what to watch for in terms of red flags or significant events in the next year. What do you think they'll be in terms of college?
I think he's exactly right. The Title IX issue never really got considered early in the House settlement, which is what drove most of this.
And explain that just quickly.
Sure. So Title IX means you have to provide equal opportunities to males and females on campus based on their essentially their ratio, their proportion. How many students, not necessarily athletes, but female students, male students. It's been that way since the Nixon administration, 1972. Pat Head Summit had a lot to do with the advent of that. So now what's going to happen is you have colleges managing this NIL money. The colleges are taking them over, state actors, and they're going to be providing the inordinate amount to football, male athletes, while the female athletes will be, quote, disadvantaged economically. I'm telling you, this is going to be a major thing that's going to affect universities in a major way.
All right, we'll circle that certainly, and appreciate you watching on this Sunday morning. We're back next week on Inside Tennessee. Until then, have a great rest of your weekend.